Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we are just past the Rule 5 draft here in the 2036 to 2037 offseason. Probably only going to sim forward about 3 weeks in this episode to the beginning of the international free agent signing period, at which point we will stop the episode, review some of the top prospects out there, and then between now and our next episode, hopefully get some help from the worldwide scouting department regarding which way we should go with the decisions we have ahead of us. Main things that we are monitoring at this point as we move through this off season, which should be relatively quiet for our Oakland A's, is whether we'll ultimately get the international free agent Federico Aldana signed. We've offered him a minor league contract that he supposedly favors and would certainly love to get him into our organization because I think he could be competing for a major league spot, even though he'd only be signing a minor league contract. And then pitching-wise on the free agent market, we continue to monitor the situation with Camden Reisinger, a guy who has been a very effective reliever for several seasons in the majors now, but a negative influence in the clubhouse, fragile physically, but he's not looking for a ton of money given how good he is. Part of it is probably that disruptive personality. We had negotiations with him about a month ago that he broke out because he wasn't pleased that we were trying to get him for 3 years with relatively cheap option years for the second and third years of that contract. Looks like he's pretty committed to a prove-it 1-year type deal. You can see he's impossible for us to sign right now. We're hoping that if he lingers on the market for another few weeks or so, perhaps he'll be somewhat more willing to negotiate with us. And good news, the international free agent Federico Aldana has signed that minor league deal with us. So that's going to give us a ton of financial flexibility with him with 3 minor league option seasons left. I'll be making the major league minimum if we promote him. Feel like he's a very low-risk guy to add into our organization. The defense, not necessarily great. The speed, certainly not great. But some very positive personality traits, and looks like he's got the ability to hit the long ball, which is always useful, particularly given that we think his contact and his avoid strikeout ratings may be a bit better than some of the guys we've had over the course of this playthrough who were good at hitting the long ball, but were also quite proficient at striking out. And we've simmed ahead another couple weeks, made it to January 15th and the beginning of the IAFA signing period. We got Mr. Aldana signed, which was obviously one key goal for us. Camden Reisinger is still on the market, but he is also still unwilling to speak with us, so perhaps that will change and he won't be impossible to sign at some point down the line. Doesn't seem like the market for him has developed the way that he would have hoped, but being a somewhat prickly personality, he's still insulted with the offer that we made him this point about a month and a half ago. So we'll see in the coming weeks and perhaps months whether or not we're able to ultimately get a deal done with Mr. Reisinger. But right now we turn our attention to what is going to be the primary focus of this episode, and that is the international amateur free agent pool. As we noted, the signing period begins today. We had, as always, 10 players in our camp that we ran through this last time. Jesus Berlanga was a relatively new addition, a guy who's not looking for all that much money, $900,000. 16-year-old reliever out of the Dominican, like the work ethic that he has. Only a 2-pitch arsenal. We do think his stuff could be incredible, despite thinking that his fastball and slider. Neither of them are going to develop into a great pitch. Potentially incredible in control, average movement. He would be a supplemental guy only. Blinky Berlanga, certainly not on the top of our list, but with the demand that he's looking for, thought that he could be someone to potentially supplement in with one or two more highly regarded players when we start making the decisions on how we intend to spend the $5.7 million that we have available in this IAFA period. A guy that we have been scouting since the beginning of the IAFA period is the starting pitcher Arturo Sandoval, 16-year-old out of Nicaragua. High adaptability and work ethic, outstanding stamina, solid at holding on runners. We think his stuff, his movement and control could all be above average, and he does have the potential to have a 3 or 4 pitch arsenal when all is said and done. 16-year-old has ground ball tendencies, already throwing in the low 90s, and we've got high scouting accuracy on him. Looking for $3.2 million, so he certainly will not be a cheap potential player to pursue, but he is, in our eyes, the most promising starting prospect in this pool. The other highly regarded starter, at least according to our scout, was Jorge Vega. He's another guy who probably is a 3 to 4 pitch arsenal when all is said and done. Doesn't throw quite as hard, doesn't have the same type of stamina, and particularly concerned about what Vega stuff will become. And he's looking for $2.4 million. So if we're going to go for a pitcher, starting pitcher, probably would go very high end with Mr. Sandoval. And we do have 8 position players that we'll end up talking about. One who was in some of our early camps that ended up missing out on the last camp when we brought the reliever in was Lee Muggeridge, but given the dual English and Scottish citizenship that he has, and the fact that we have some very loyal viewers over in that part of the world, figured we would take a look at Muggeridge. The gap power and the home run power are both potentially incredible, like the high work ethic, good outfield range, pretty good speed, excellent bunter. I am very worried about his ability to hit the ball and to avoid strikeouts. The left-handed hitting outfielder is an interesting prospect, but with the $2.8 million that he is looking for, did not like him quite as much as some of the other prospects. We do have very high scouting accuracy on him if things don't go well with some of our top picks. I know there's probably some members of the worldwide scouting department that wouldn't mind a English/Scottish national on our roster and in our organization. So he is definitely a fallback option for us at this point, particularly with the money that he's looking for. But we'll see what happens over the coming weeks. The lowest regarded prospect among the hitters that we have brought into camp is Luis Covarrubias. Sometimes when I look at that name quickly, I think his name is Luis Coronavirus, and that makes me a little reticent to bring the 17-year-old catcher from the Dominican on board. But he does have a lot going for him, a lot of very positive personality traits. Looks like he could be an excellent defensive catcher and a pretty good contact hitter with decent gap power, home run power, and eye if he completely develops. Covarrubias looking for only $420,000, and signing should be very easy. We've got high scouting accuracy on him. Definitely seems like somebody that we could try to combine with a more expensive prospect, which is part of the reason we've had him in camp. Another player whose demand is not particularly high is the third baseman Nelson Olalde, looking for $450,000. We've got very high scouting accuracy on the third baseman from Colombia. Looks like he's got a gun for an arm as a third baseman, decent speed, and a potentially interesting bat, a borderline world-class eye if it fully develops, with well above average home run power and gap power and decent contact. Similar to our friend Covarrubias, Olalde probably not going to be a primary focus for us, but those two guys, along with the inexpensive reliever that we mentioned, Jesus Berlanga, could definitely be in the mix to look for as a supplemental player or two to one of the big guns that we'd go after. And we've already talked about the big starting pitcher that we could consider going after. And there are also more than a handful of position players that we'd be willing to put in the mix as well. 6, if you actually count them up. And all 6 of the position players left that we're going to talk about have 5-star potential, according to our scout. The one guy that we haven't had in camp who's a 5-star prospect is Alfredo Silva, first baseman who looks like he could have a very interesting bat, but pitiful speed, pretty poor defensively, and a very negative personality. Moody, he does hang on to those losses, so at least he does care. But given the depth of the pool, Sungo Silva was just someone with that personality that we were never going to seriously consider bringing on board. At $3.6 million in terms of his asking price, he's also one of the most expensive prospects out there. Center fielder Fidel Trujillo is probably more of a natural corner outfielder, maybe a right fielder when all is said and done. Okay in terms of his speed. Pretty interesting potential bat. Think his contact and his home run power could both be well above average. Right-handed line drive hitter, the Phoenix, could be a interesting addition to the team. He's looking for $2.8 million. Another center fielder, Noe Ruelas Snookums, is a fragile 16-year-old, another guy who looks more like a corner outfielder, some positive personality traits, decent but not great speed, and another guy who we think, when all is said and done, his contact and his home run power could be borderline excellent. Snookums is looking for $2.2 million, so a little cheaper than most of the other top-flight prospects, but he is also fragile, and he does have that low adaptability, so perhaps not as clean a prospect as Trujillo or some others. And the last 4 prospects that we're going to talk about are all middle infielders, at least today they are. We'll start with the oldest and most expensive. The $3.8 million asking price for Luis Ramirez is the highest of any of these international amateur free agent prospects. But Ramirez is a good-looking second base prospect. Looks like he might be more of a natural third baseman when all is said and done. Contact, gap power, home run power, and eye all could be above average to well above average if he reaches his full potential. Decent speed. Right-handed hitter, is almost 18 years old. So as I noticed, one of the older prospects out here for Cyclone Ramirez. Think just in terms of his age and his asking price, probably not the direction that we'll go because we do like some of these other middle infielders better than him. Second most expensive on the list at $3.2 million is Jesus Esquivel, also a second baseman. Defensively, he's going to have to improve a lot to be able to play in the infield. Could be a pretty mediocre corner outfielder as well. At 6'2", could move to first base. And given that we think he could have otherworldly home run power, he might work out okay at first base. Also think his gap power and his eye could be excellent. And with the pretty solid speed that he has, this is a guy who looks like he could be an extra base machine and draw a ton of walks. The issue is going to be making contact and avoiding strikeouts. Doesn't seem like there are any particularly positive personality traits, but General Saito is certainly an interesting prospect and obviously on the short list of the players that we are considering. A little less expensive than Esquivel is Luis Arellano, 16-year-old also out of Venezuela, looking for $3 million. Arellano, a very well-balanced prospect. We think his contact, gap power, home run power, and eye could all max out at 60 or higher. Pretty decent infield range, high adaptability and work ethic. The right-handed hitting shortstop is a very interesting player to think about. The nickname Gargoyle is also unique. And the cheapest of these four middle infield prospects is David Palomares. You may remember him. He was probably the guy that we were leaning towards when we first reviewed this crew back in mid-October. But that was done with much less scouting accuracy than we have today. Today, the scouting accuracy on him is up to high as opposed to low. Like the durability of Palomares, high adaptability and intelligence, decent speed, although his base running instincts are pretty average. A pretty interesting defensive profile for an infielder, particularly for a 16-year-old. Hopefully that could develop a bit better over the years. And the bat is very well balanced and potentially excellent. 70 contact, 70 power, 65 gap power, and 65 eye if he reaches his full potential, which is always a challenge for these young players. Left-handed hitting middle infielder, which is, I don't want to say a unicorn, but it can be unique, particularly one who we think bat could be as good as we think Palomares could be. Gorian del Quimbo, the left-handed hitting 16-year-old, is probably still the guy that I'm leaning towards at $2.8 million asking price. Certainly could be convinced otherwise by the worldwide scouting department. But when I look at Palomares at $2.8 million, one of the least expensive of the 5-star potential prospects out there, he's the only one who's durable. He's probably the best fielder of the crew and a potentially very well-balanced and very effective left-handed hitter if he comes close to reaching his full potential. So Palomares is probably the direction I'm leaning. Also, like, as we talked about, the fact that he's only looking for $2.8 million, because that could allow us to try to layer in a Olalde, a Covarrubias, or potentially even a Berlanga with him. Arturo Sandoval, I'm always attracted to pitchers, and Sandoval is certainly a decent one, more than a decent one in terms of his prospect, in terms of his potential as a prospect. $3.2 million is not an incredible price for the player who is probably the best pitching prospect in this year's class. That being said, I think I'm leaning towards a position player. And Palomares really jumps off the page for me with his potential, the durability, the defense, couple of positive personality traits. Obviously no guarantees with any of these players, but I do think the 6'2 shortstop out of Venezuela is a very high ceiling and a pretty clean prospect when you put the whole package together. So that is the direction I am leaning, but it's always useful for me to hear other opinions from the worldwide scouting department. So if you have thoughts, now is the time. If you're watching this late Sunday or early to midday to late afternoon Monday before I'll be making these decisions, to speak now or forever hold your peace if you are an esteemed member of the worldwide scouting department. And if you are watching this episode and willing to share your thoughts in the comment section down below, you are by default an esteemed member of the worldwide scouting department, and always appreciate the interaction and the input. I think my thought is I'd probably go $3.5 million-ish on Palomares right up front. Just try to lock him up immediately, and then hopefully get him locked up, have $2 million plus to spend, and then hope that the likes of Alalde, Berlanga, and perhaps even Covarrubias are still on the market, and maybe supplement with some combination of those. If Palomares doesn't work out, or we decide to go in a different direction, it could be one of the different position players, the infielders or the center fielders, or Sandoval as our primary target, with some of those other guys as potential supplemental additions to what I hope will be a fruitful IAFA class for the Oakland A's. So if you have thoughts on which direction we should go in the IAFA pool, as I mentioned, always useful for me to hear what you're thinking. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.